Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestle News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there is a ton of news stories to get into today. It's Impact Wrestling on Access TV Day, so of course we're going to be talking about some Impact Wrestling, and we're going to be starting off talking about a departure from the Knockouts division. Now, I was thinking of putting a spoiler warning on this one, but now it's public knowledge because Kiera Hogan herself has announced her departure from Impact Wrestling. Yes, former Knockouts Tag Team Champions, one half of the former Knockouts Tag Team Champions, one half of the now former tag team Fire and Flavor. Kiera Hogan is now done with Impact Wrestling. Hogan announced her departure on her OnlyFans account that she is finished with the company and is finished up with the organization at the most recent set of television tapings held in Nashville, Tennessee this past week. This is what she had to say on her account, quote, "What's up, babies? I'm in Nashville for tapings, and you guys will be first to know that this is my last Impact tapings, and I'm going to see what else is out there for me. I'm so excited and scared, but I know whatever I choose to do, I'm going to be the best." And that's on period. Now, it was reported back in August of 2019 that Kiera Hogan had signed a multi-year contract with the company that summer. So if we're talking 2 years, that would make sense considering that Impact Wrestling has just taped, 3, 4, 5 weeks worth of television, which would take them well into August. So this would be her final commitment with Impact Wrestling. There had been discussions that her contract was set to expire this year, and there wasn't any news that she had re-signed a contract with Impact Wrestling. Fightful Select was first to report this news earlier this week. We'll touch on something in a second. Now, known as Fire and Flavor, Kiera Hogan and Tasha Steelz won the tournament to revive the Impact Wrestling Knockouts Tag Team Championships earlier this year at the Hard to Kill pay-per-view on January 16th. They then dropped the championships to Jordynne Grace and Rachel Ellering at Impact Rebellion on April 25th, but they won them back the following month at Impact Under Siege. Now, in a surprising move, certainly for myself, maybe not for some others, but certainly for myself, Fire and Flavor lost the Knockouts Tag Team Championships to Havoc and Rosemary of Decay at Slammiversary this past Sunday on the pre-show. Certainly, that came out of left field for me. Now, this is a bit of a spoiler warning, so we'll give you 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And the spoiler is that it was something we've spoken about openly here on the channel in a couple of videos that we've done. But a new storyline with the tag team is set to play out over the next few episodes of Impact Wrestling on Access TV that was taped this past week. That storyline involves Fire and Flavor splitting up, with Tasha Steelz getting a new tag team partner and attacking Kiera Hogan. Now, when this played out on Impact Wrestling television over the course of the last week, the general feeling was that Impact Wrestling was writing Kiera Hogan off of television because they weren't sure what the situation was with her contract at the time. Now, Kiera Hogan has officially confirmed that she is leaving Impact Wrestling and she's assessing her options. So, it's now she's openly admitted that she's leaving Impact Wrestling. Now that she's confirmed the news, everything kind of makes a bit more sense, doesn't it? Because when they, as I mentioned, when they lost the Knockouts Tag Team Championships on Saturday, I found that very surprising, very, very surprising, because I thought, this is a tag team that really the Knockouts Tag Team division has kind of been built around in Impact Wrestling since they revived the championships. Of course, inaugural champions after bringing the championships back at Hard to Kill. As I mentioned, they only just won the championships back in May, which is a couple of months ago. So I thought there's no way they would only have a couple of months championship reign. This is the main tag team in the Knockouts Tag Team division. They've been certainly featured heavily on Impact Wrestling programming for, the entirety of this year, certainly as the Knockouts Tag Team champions. So them dropping the championship, I suppose, should have served as a bit of a red flag. That's also, as well, you have to remember, it was on the pre-show too, so it wasn't even a featured pay-per-view match. All of that should have served as a red flag, as something's definitely up here. Something's definitely happening. And then, as I mentioned, Fightful Select, which of course is their Patreon service. If there's ever a week to subscribe to them, it's definitely this week. They were first to report the news that was happening at the latest set of Impact Wrestling television tapings about this storyline, about Fire and Flavor splitting up. And they did mention at the time that this was likely due to Kiera Hogan's contract expiring with Impact Wrestling. Now, I think it's interesting that in her message that she sent to her fans on her OnlyFans account, she mentioned that this is her last Impact Wrestling television tapings, and I think this is the most important bit here. I'm going to see what else is out there for me. So I don't think you can rule out a return to Impact Wrestling. If we've learned anything over the course of the last year or so, especially with people like Trey Miguel is a great example of this, of talents that their contract expires with the company, they see what's out there, and they say, you know what, there are opportunities out there, but there are better opportunities for me back in Impact Wrestling. That's what happened with Trey Miguel. All of the Rascals, their contract expires. the expectation was that all of them were going to go to WWE. Certainly, Dez and Wentz went to WWE, and they're now MSK. They're now the NXT Tag Team Champions. Trey Miguel thought that offer wasn't for him. He had some personal issues going on at the time. He felt that there was better opportunities for him in Impact, so he decided to re-sign with Impact Wrestling. The same thing could happen with Kiera Hogan. Maybe she just wants to see what's out there. She has a look what's out there, has a look at the options that are available out there, and says, you know what, I'm going to go back to Impact. I'm going to continue this storyline with Tasha Steelz and her new tag team partner, and I'm going to try and work it as a single star in the Knockouts division going forward. That's a possibility as well. That's absolutely a possibility. You have to remember, Kiera Hogan first signed with Impact Wrestling / GFW at the time, back in August of 2017. So she was with the company for about 4 years. I mean, she did her time, if you will. That's certainly the average amount of time for people in Impact Wrestling nowadays. I mentioned before that her partner, Diamante, does obviously currently compete in AEW. Now, Diamante, of course, was part of a tag team in AEW with Ivelisse. Now, Ivelisse was subsequently released by AEW due to issues backstage, reported behavioral issues. So I suppose you could look at a situation where maybe AEW are interested in bringing in Kiera Hogan to be Diamante's tag team partner. That's a possibility that I don't think they'll rule out. Certainly, I really don't see a situation of Kiera Hogan going to WWE. Why? Well, the reasons are very obvious there. We covered them here on the channel earlier this year, that there is, I don't know so much from Sasha Banks' side, but there's certainly from Kiera Hogan's side, there's a significant amount of heat, and there's an issue between Kiera Hogan and Sasha Banks. Kiera Hogan has been very, very vocal at throwing shots towards Sasha Banks, suggesting that she copied her look and the blue hair, and stating that she stole lots of things from her, again, including her appearance, and said that she was watching her Instagram stories and saying that she wasn't a very nice person and nobody likes her within the industry, all that kind of stuff. I would be very surprised, and don't get me wrong, I know that business is business, and at the end of the day, if WWE thinks that they can make money off Kiera Hogan, then they would sign her. But I think they would certainly look at that and say, would we really want to be bringing Kiera Hogan in, considering in the past she has openly criticized and put some allegations out against one of our top female talents, and just in general top talents in the company? I doubt they would go in that direction. So I don't think WWE or NXT is really an option for Kiera Hogan right now. You know, Ring of Honor, obviously they're relaunching their women's division. They're currently having the tournament for the Women's World Championship in ROH. That's certainly a possibility. There probably would be spots maybe in MLW as well. Certainly there would be in the NWA. I think that's certainly a potential, and I could definitely see Kiera Hogan going into the NWA. Of course, the NWA right now has this renewed focus on women's wrestling. They've got the NWA Empower All Women's Pay-Per-View, and I'm sure, considering that's literally just as I'm recording right now, AEW have announced the full-time signing of Thunder Rosa. There are certainly spots on that roster, and I think if Kiera Hogan came into an NWA, she would certainly be featured front and center in that women's division, and maybe that's what Kiera Hogan wants. So I would say if there's going to be companies that aren't Impact Wrestling that she goes to in the future, I think the NWA is right up there. Again, not that that really means anything, because these boundaries between companies now are getting more and more fluid. You have to remember, as we spoke about here on the channel, about 18 months ago, the NWA, not so much from Impact's point of view, but the NWA looking at Impact, the NWA hated Impact Wrestling, hated them. Especially their president, Billy Corgan. He hated Impact Wrestling with a passion. Now, of course, that stemmed from his own history in Impact Wrestling. That stemmed from his issues with Dixie Carter. But it also stemmed from some issues that he suggested that Impact Wrestling had stolen talent from the NWA, etc., etc. Now, fast forward 18 months later, we've got a working relationship going on. We're going to touch on it in a second. But Mickie James, who is the executive producer for that NWA Empower pay-per-view, she's on Impact Wrestling tonight. There are discussions, well, not discussions, it is going to happen. The Impact Wrestling Knockouts champion is going to work an NWA women's pay-per-view. She's going to be facing Melina. And possibly we're going to see even more crossover in the future. So those boundaries between companies, as I mentioned, are getting far more fluid than they've ever been. So just because Kiera Hogan maybe could sign with an NWA doesn't mean she won't come back to Impact Wrestling. And as I mentioned, we don't know what her plans are going forward. You know, irrespective of where she lands, she could end up back in Impact Wrestling because of these working relationships right now. Even if it's AEW, if it's the NWA, even if it's Ring of Honor. Everything's changing right now outside of WWE, and certainly in terms of of companies working together. So it's an interesting story, as again, all of the booking decisions when it comes to Fire and Flavor now start to make sense. Those pieces are now starting to come together, and it makes a lot more sense. But certainly it's sad to see her go. I thought I think that she's a very talented in the ring. I think she's decent on the microphone, but it'd be interesting to see where she lands next. Now, let's talk about the first ever, technically, Impact World Champion. He was an NWA World Heavyweight Champion at the time, but Impact Hall of Famer Ken Shamrock. I know some people have been asking here on the channel when we've been doing the Impact Wrestling news videos, asking what's the situation when it comes to Ken Shamrock? Is he still with Impact Wrestling? Has he left? Has his contract expired? What is going on? What's the situation? Now, Ken Shamrock, he had been seen regularly on Impact Wrestling television throughout 2019 and 2020, but the world's most dangerous man was in a fit of rage on the January 26, 2021 edition of Impact Wrestling. He attacked Impact Wrestling officials, kayfabe, and Sami Callihan as the show went on the air. Now, as a result, Ken Shamrock was suspended indefinitely by Impact Wrestling, and he hasn't, of course, appeared on the program since. Now, he was recently on a episode of Cultaholic Conversations, and he explained the reason as to why he's currently not appearing on Impact Wrestling going forward. He revealed that Impact and himself mutually agreed he should take some time off, and he also admitted that he was finding it increasingly difficult to wrestle in an empty arena setting, of course, which was forced by the pandemic. This is what Shamrock had to say, quote, "I think it was a mutual agreement. It was difficult for me to wrestle with no fans. I've always felt the impact, no pun intended, from the fans, being able to know when to do something, know when to get excited, screaming and becoming crazy and doing all of those things all elevate from the fans. Not having the fans there was a real strain on me, and it just didn't feel right. I know to a lot of people it doesn't matter, but to me, I thought it was a big missing piece. Even though I did fine, it was great matches and a good thing, but the extra piece for me, really to be able to have gone over the top and be that Ken Shamrock of old, was the fans missing. It just felt like I couldn't have that extra oomph that I needed to be able to feed off those fans." He also mentioned that Impact also felt that maybe I should step back and take some time. Even though everything was going fine, there was nothing wrong. I was more focused on trying to get my promotion going, which is the Valor Bare Knuckle Fighting organization. We're looking to really see how we can make that something special. I think that bare knuckle fighting is the future. Now, of course, fans have since returned. They returned at the Slammiversary pay-per-view last weekend on July 17. And because of that, Ken Shamrock hasn't ruled out one more Impact run that he's now able to wrestle in front of a live audience again. He said, quote, "Yeah, I'm always an entertainer. I love the fans. I've always loved it. I've always loved being in the ring and competing, especially in front of the fans. It's not the same, or at least for me, it's not the same unless they're in the audience." So that's really the update when it comes to Ken Shamrock. It doesn't look like, as of right now, there are any plans for him to come back. I don't think that he's got a contract with Impact Wrestling right now. Certainly doesn't seem like it. If what he's saying is accurate, and we have to take him at face value, of course, he's basically saying that he was a bit like, I didn't really want to do this if there's no fans, and Impact were probably paying him a pretty penny as well. He is Ken Shamrock after all, and he's hardly the youngest guy on the roster, and especially in the pandemic, you're looking to make sure you don't overspend. It certainly seemed like a mutual thing of Ken Shamrock going, it's just not the same in front of fans, and then basically going, look, if you want to take some time away and you want to focus on your own things, that's fine, and maybe we can work something out in the future. I've spoken about this before here on the channel, that Impact are very open when it comes to contracts, very open when it comes to deals, per taping deals, per appearance deals, a couple of months contract here and there, no contract, just a handshake. That's kind of how they operate now, and they've certainly benefited from that. They've benefited from that in that it's allowed them to bring in stars that maybe wouldn't have been interested in being tied down to just Impact Wrestling in the past. So personally, I think considering that they're heading back to Vegas for Bound for Glory in October, Shamrock's been based out of Vegas before. He even made his Impact Wrestling return in Las Vegas in 2019. I think that he will come back for one more run, especially now crowds are back. I think that Shamrock still does have the itch. I know some people, certainly some Impact Wrestling fans, think he's too old and some of his matches are poor, but he does have name recognition, he does have name value, and, we're in the business, once again, of selling tickets. So who knows? I would suggest that we probably see him back again, but if we don't, he's got nothing to prove, and it's not a case of Impact Wrestling desperately needing Ken Shamrock back in. I think it would just, if they could possibly do something once again with him and Callihan, even though that's kind of played out, I don't know. There's options. There certainly is options, but we don't know if we're going to see Ken Shamrock back. Certainly looks like he would be open to it. I suppose Impact might be open to it. Time will only tell. Now, at Slammiversary this past Saturday, Don Callis made reference to GCW World Champion Nick Gage, of course the same Nick Gage that made his AEW debut last night on Dynamite. Now, Game Changer Wrestling took to social media to ask Kenny Omega, the Impact World Champion and AEW World Champion, to come to next weekend's GCW Homecoming event and prove it. GCW tweeted, you can see it on the screen right there, "Omega tougher than Gage. Don Callis, what are you smoking, pal? You and Kenny are welcome to come and prove it, but you have to get in line," and that line starts Saturday at GCW Homecoming weekend. Saturday, Gage versus Cardona. Sunday, Gage versus Omega. See you there. Now, as of right now, Kenny Omega hasn't responded. GCW Homecoming Night 1 is on July 24 and Night 2 is on July 25 and will take place in Atlantic City, New Jersey. Of course, on July 24, Nick Gage will be facing Matt Cardona, which is a red-hot match, and I'm fascinated to see what that looks like. I'm fascinated to see if Matt Cardona goes full deathmatch wrestling. I feel like he will. And look, this is a huge time period for Nick Gage. Of course, he was featured on Dark Side of the Ring earlier this year. He appears on TNT. Nick Gage on TNT last night on Fight Fest. He's facing Chris Jericho next week. So he's going from a few days of facing Matt Cardona to Chris Jericho. I mean, what a time period for Nick Gage. It's incredible. Will Kenny Omega show up this weekend? I don't think so. I don't know truly if I see Kenny Omega with his schedule, with everything how it is at the moment, with his schedule with Impact, AEW, AAA, with everything that's going on. I don't think he'll show up, but you never know. I mean, the Bout Collector gimmick is the gimmick right now, and maybe he does show up. I struggle to think he'll carry around the GCW World Championship along with the Impact World Championship, along with the AEW World Championship, along with the AAA Mega Championship. I think there are only so many bouts you can collect. I don't think they will, but I'm fascinated to see what happens with Nick Gage and Matt Cardona at Homecoming this weekend. I think it's going to be fascinating. I'm interested to see how Cardona fares in that arena, because I think it's going to be crazy. I think it's going to be nuts. And I think also as well, and I touched on this in the AEW news video we did earlier today, because of course, as I mentioned, Gage did appear on Fight Fest last night, and he's going to be facing Jericho next week, the Painmaker version of Chris Jericho. I don't know if Chris Jericho knows what he's getting himself in for. Honestly, I really don't. Nick Gage is something else, and I'm fascinated to see what they do on TNT next week, because he came out with a pizza cutter, and even last night on the Texas Death Match, the closing match between Moxley and Lance Archer. I mean, Moxley stabbing Archer in the head with a fork, and I was watching that being like, sometimes you put yourself in the position of like a TNT official or executive watching this being like, can we do this on cable television? I know it's past 9 o'clock or whatever, but still, can we do this? So, and Nick Gage, he's another kettle of fish. He is on another level to that kind of stuff. So I'm fascinated to see what happens this weekend. I'm fascinated to see what happens next week as well. It's going to be very interesting, to say the least. Now, tonight is another episode of Impact Wrestling on Access TV. It's the post-Slammiversary edition of Impact, and there's been quite a few major things already announced for tonight's show. One being the Impact on Access TV debut of the never openweight champion Jay White, who was scheduled to appear on tonight's broadcast. Now, of course, at the end of Slammiversary this past weekend, White got in the ring during Impact World Champion Kenny Omega's post-match celebration after defeating Sami Callihan. The Good Brothers and Don Callis flanked Omega and offered up the 2 sweets to White as the show went off the air. Now, obviously, there's lots of spoilers out there, so we kind of know what's going to happen anyway, but nevertheless, I'm still going to be very interested to see how they produce it, what it looks like. Maybe there are some things we don't know that are going to happen. Of course, all the fans know is what's happening inside the ring. Sometimes they post-produce segments and add them into the show that they may have recorded over the course of the last few days anyway. So there's always a reason to tune into Impact Wrestling. I know they're hoping for a ratings increase after that cliffhanger as Slammiversary went off the air on Saturday. I think it's kind of the cliffhanger nature was reduced slightly considering the spoilers that have come out this week, but it's still going to be fascinating to look at, and I'm very excited to see what Impact Wrestling does tonight. Another thing that has been announced for tonight's show is Mickie James. Legendary wrestler Mickie James is also scheduled to appear this week after dropping Impact Knockouts champion Deonna Purrazzo at Slammiversary 2. Again, we know the direction that is heading in. We know that Deonna Purrazzo isn't going to be facing Mickie James for now. There are hopes and plans maybe to do it in the future. We don't know if that's in an NWA ring, an Impact Wrestling ring. Time will only tell. But we do know the plans as to Deonna Purrazzo and NWA Empower. We've spoken about them on the channel before, and they are out there. We won't spoil it here. Hopefully they'll touch on that once again tonight on Impact Wrestling on Access TV. Finally, we have a bit of an update when it comes to Eric Young and his return to the ring after his knee injury he sustained earlier this year. Now, Joe Doring sat down with Joe Carney of the Angle podcast to discuss all things Impact Wrestling, and he was asked about when we can expect Violent by Design's leader Eric Young to return to the ring. Now, Joe Doring stated he believes that Eric Young might be able to wrestle again by the time Bound for Glory rolls around in October. This would certainly be ahead of schedule. Doring said, quote, "I know he's rehabbing excellently. Wrestlers heal well and fast. I would expect him to be back in 5 or 6 months. From now, only 3 to 4 months. Hopefully by Bound for Glory, he'll be back in the ring full time." Now, many people were surprised. Obviously, you see Joe Doring return to Impact Wrestling in 2020. He was well known in Japan, not so much in the United States. So many people were surprised to see him land in Impact Wrestling. As to why he came to Impact Wrestling, well, he actually revealed it. It was a very simple thing. He said, quote, "It was time to leave Japan. I had been there a long time. My road was run there. It was time to give the United States platform a try." I've been very honest, and I've said this time and time again. Not only am I a big fan of Violent by Design, I was a bit upset to see him lose the Impact Tag Team Championships on Saturday. I get why they did it. I get why they switched them to the Good Brothers. It's an exposure thing, considering they're on New Japan, AEW, and Impact. From a marketing point of view, that does make sense. I'm a big fan of Joe Doring. I think he's such a throwback. He reminds me of Stan Hansen, but a more modern day version. Even though he's a throwback, I think he's great in his role as a heater for Impact Wrestling. I was a big fan of the match he had with Kojima at the Under Siege pay-per-view back in May. I thought that was excellent. I really, truly thought that was excellent. Or was that Against All Odds? It was Against All Odds in June, rather. So many things going on at the moment. I thought it was great, and they've had their battles in Japan, but it was just such a throwback, and it reminded me of watching pro wrestling when I was growing up, and just had that hard-hitting, physical style. Nothing too flashy, just being real, just putting it out there. I'm a big fan of Joe Doring, and I'm excited to see what he can do going forward in Impact. Hopefully Eric Young is back by October and at Bound for Glory. It was such a shame to see him go down with his injury, because ever since he returned to Impact Wrestling, truly the work he's been doing has just been spectacular. I mean, really, considering how cold he was coming out of WWE last year, talk about turning a negative into a positive. He's been doing some of the best work in Impact Wrestling. So fingers crossed he's in the ring, back in the ring sooner rather than later. But look, guys, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on all of these Impact Wrestling news stories we've spoken about today? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about Impact Wrestling, AEW, WWE, New Japan Pro Wrestling, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So be sure to get involved in the community, drop a comment below. All opinions are welcome. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button too. Really does help us out here on YouTube. Go to the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or have you come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.